From Keith Scott to the September 11th bill to his memories of September 11th, Congressman Mark Sanford sits down with me one-on-one for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. Congressman Sanford, you know, the last time I saw you was, I believe, February 19th. I was working at Market Street Deli on a Friday, and you were en route to the other end of the market for an MSNBC live taping. And I wanted to do an interview with you, but I was at work and I didn't have the camera at the time. But little did I know, you were actually going to be on the verge of endorsing Senator Ted Cruz for president.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where it had probably less to do with Senator Cruz than it did some concerns about Donald Trump, and he was the last guy standing before Trump got the nomination. If you're a Southern guy, and I am, every lesson my dad taught me about humility and a softer approach seems to be going out the door with Donald Trump. And I get people's desire for change. That's what's ultimately driving this train. But at that time, I was very concerned, and to a degree still am, about his conduct toward others. It doesn't fit with what, again, my dad and mom tried to teach me.
Yeah. And as you know, just a few days ago, Senator Ted Cruz actually endorsed Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
When you heard that news, what did you tell yourself?
Well, that's just the way things go in politics. And I get it's a team sport,
Okay.
and that's why he ultimately chose to support the nominee, and I have, and I'm with that.
Describe to me the following one word, tonight's first presidential debate.
Fireworks. I suspect it's going to be not short on.
Yeah. Keith Scott.
Tell me more.
Oh, that was the guy who was involved with the police shooting in Charlotte.
Okay, yeah. Tragic. A study in contrast. We had an equally tragic event occur here in North Charleston.
Right.
And yet what was interesting was the response of people here in the community. In my office in Washington sits a picture of a sea of hands, if you will, holding each other. They're of all colors. There's an American flag in the background, and the port of Charleston even further behind. It was during the Unity Walk.
Right.
It's an amazing picture, and it, for me, reminds me of sort of the spirit of Charleston. I spoke at an event last night, yesterday afternoon, and I told folks of something that was fairly profound that an acquaintance had told me the night before. He had, done a walkabout, all the bucket list items that you think would be the coolest ever. Yet his takeaway at the end of the year was he was unfulfilling, he was not satisfying, and that a good part of happiness is simply found in community. If you have community, you're going to have it. And it's true of a friendship relationship, a marriage relationship, a business relationship, a country, a city. If you don't, you're in real trouble. And so I guess to answer your question in short form, tragic and awful, but also a study in contrast.
September 23rd, President Obama vetoed the 9/11 bill, which victims' families could have sued Saudi Arabia. And I know that a potential veto might be on its way to Congress. When you think of the 9/11 bill, what goes in your mind, Congressman?
Well, the idea people ultimately want resolution to any tragedy. I mean, that's why people are looking for the video up in Charlotte. They're like, just let us see it. If it's what you say it is, we're going to be happy. Okay. If it's not, we want to know. And so the same thing goes on with 9/11 victims. There's a degree of connectivity between what happened, perpetrators and Saudi Arabia, and people are saying, well, wait a minute, let's throw this out in the court of law, let a jury decide whether our suspicions are accurate or not. People want closure.
September 11th, 2016, you said the following on Facebook, quote, "I generally don't post on Sundays, since I believe they are a day of rest. But given what happened 15 years ago, I'm compelled to do so." September 11th is one of those days most of us can recall exactly what we were doing when we heard the news that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. For me, it was a phone call from my sister as I was about to speak at a rotary held in a church in Greenwood. 15 years later, where are you emotionally still?
Time heals all. It should heal all. Doesn't necessarily with all people. Some people who never let an injury, a slight, whatever go. My dad used to say, hate corrodes the carrier it's contained in. And so I think it's important, whether from the standpoint of forgiveness, which is ultimately not about the perpetrator, but it's about the victim and letting it go, or different tragic events. It's important to remember them, but it's important not to build your life around them. Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't say that there's an emotional response at this point with 9/11. It's a solemn remembrance of what happened, the lives that were lost, its implications in terms of foreign policy. I had friends of friends who died that day. I didn't have any direct friends that were tragically jumping out of buildings, burning buildings, or consumed in the collapse of that building.
Yeah. Guantanamo Bay. You said also on Facebook that the president just doesn't know when no means no. The House on September 15th, as you know, passed the Guantanamo Bay Transfer Prevention Act, which would stop the president from transferring those detainees from the prison to U.S. or foreign countries until, I believe, January 21st.
Correct.
You actually voted yes. I'm wondering why.
Because the moratorium on his ability to take unilateral action ends at the end of this month. So when you get to the end of the fiscal year, that's why I voted previously for an Adler amendment saying we need to have a conversation on indefinite detention. I don't think that indefinite detention is consistent with our value system as Americans, and what we used to do after World War II or other conflicts. Just put you before a military tribunal. You didn't have the same standard of justice that you would find in a civilian court. Right. But if we found you guilty, we took you out back and we shot you. There was finality of the process. We didn't hold somebody for 15, 20 years, or what could be 40 or 45 years without charges. We brought whatever charges we had and we put it to rest. I think that kind of finality is important when you're dealing with enemy combatants. But I'm going off on a tangent.
No worries.
September 30th is the end of the fiscal year. There have been 5 different pieces of legislation that would allow me to vote for the Nadler Amendment saying we need to have this conversation, because there were 5 different pin downs that prevented the president from being able to close Guantanamo Bay or in a unilateral form move prisoners to the domestic U.S. or foreign spots, as you point out. That ends September 30th.
Okay.
So it was important for the House to say, wait a minute, between September 30th and the time you leave office, you don't get to take unilateral action. And I think that's important, not just from the standpoint of the brig in North Charleston, but it's important from the standpoint of curbing the president's appetite for unilateral action, which I think is outside the bounds of what the Constitution prescribes in terms of, only the Congress gets to create laws. The judicial branch can interpret them. The executive branch can administer them. He has sort of moved into the territory of creating laws, and that ultimately has long-term implications.
Well, finish describing me the following in one word: the Truth in the Government Act.
Give me more, because those aren't the kinds of things that can be described in one word.
Oh, no worries. I know you posted something about the Government Act as far as trying to find truth in different bills. Talk to me more about that.
Well, again, I would say that too often the label is not consistent with the ingredients of what you see in legislation.
Okay.
I guess that'd be the simplest way to put it, because you'll have these labels that get people fairly, oh, that sounds good, but then when you look in the actual ingredients, right, it's a bit different, and that'd be the simplest analogy.
The penny plan.
Mm-hmm. Penny plan, again, it's a bill that we've got out there. In short form, again, trying to boil it down.
Okay.
Einstein was once asked what's the most powerful force in the universe. His reply was compound interest. And so every time, in a city across the state of South Carolina, other places, they said, we want to have a 1 penny sales tax. It's only a penny, only a penny.
Right.
And yet those pennies add up to a lot of money.
Mm.
What we try and do is take that same principle and reverse it. say, let's just cut a penny. It's just a penny.
Right.
And if you did that for 5 years, we end up back at a balanced budget. And I think it's incredibly important from the standpoint of having numbers that work for a family, having numbers that work in government, getting back to a balanced budget. So that's what the penny plan's about. We've introduced it and we're working on it.
The Charleston Harbor Deepening Project.
Trying to get to 52 feet. This week will actually be an important week on that front. We're going to take up the bill on the House side. We've had a couple weeks of back and forth and back and forth, but the long story short is it'll get approved at the House level. And then when we come back in the lame duck session, it'll go to what's called conference, and they'll iron out the difference between the Senate version and the House version. But the bottom line is, at this point, it's moving forward, and that's incredibly important from the standpoint of maintaining the time schedule for the deepening here. If we're going to stay competitive as a port, we've got to get to that deeper depth, given the fact that the Panama Canal was widened, and it was open this summer, and there are much bigger boats now coming from Southeast Asia into someplace, and we'd like that place to be Charleston.
The United States debit is currently at?
Debit, what do you mean? You mean deficit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the deficit is running around $500 billion, more or less. It's tipping up, so we're on our way to 600. The real number is actually much bigger than that, because if you look at the gulf between last year's debt and this year's debt, it does not equal deficit. Which you would think it would. You'd be like, okay, the difference between what I made and what I spent, that's my deficit, right? Well, not exactly, because what you have is intergovernmental agency borrowings that are technically not part of the deficit, but they get added to the debt. I would argue that that's also part of the deficit. That'll put us up around $1 trillion. That is not sustainable, and it's going to end really badly if we don't do something about it. And it's going to hurt people in terms of standard of living. It's going to hurt them in terms of future inflation. It's going to hurt them in terms of the value of the dollar and everything that they've saved over the course of their lives.
Mark Sanford for governor again.
No, been there, done that. Yeah, people. There's a lot of rumor. I don't know why it's out there, but I'm trying to be the best congressman I can be, and that's it.
You are. You are. And we thank you for your service.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Good to see you.
You too. Congressman Mark Sanford, thank you again. I really appreciate this.
Yes, sir. Pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.